You were warned this would happen, and now the one line that was never supposed to be crossed has been crossed in full public view, and Prince William is not just angry, they're saying he is completely finished.
Exploded, and can you blame him? Absolutely not. By releasing pictures of Archie and Lily at Althorpe with flowers about to visit Princess Diana's grave for the first time.
Prince William has made a bold, shocking, dramatic move, one that nobody can stop him from doing. With this, he has said enough is enough. You will not exploit the remains of my dead mother.
Meghan Markle knows what she is doing. Meghan Markle is not a dumb girl. In my opinion, she's a narcissist, she's a sociopath, she understands how the game is played. She was not gonna go to Diana's gravesite and not post a picture. I wanna know who's taking the picture in the black bathing suit. I will also say, because this is why y'all tune into this show, she's not delivering it like Princess Diana, but she must really think she's—
Here is the part that changes everything. The part that makes this feel less like a family dispute and more like a slow motion collision that everybody saw coming but nobody stopped. Because behind the polite headlines and the softened language, the reality being whispered is brutally simple. Prince William never wanted that door opened. Not for a reunion, not for a gesture, not even for a moment of peace. And yet it opened anyway. Why? Because a father, weakened and looking at time differently, made a decision that cut straight through every warning placed in front of him. And in that moment, something shifted, something irreversible. Think about the tension buried inside that choice. A son standing firm, another son returning with history trailing behind him, and in the middle, a man who simply wanted to see his grandchildren before it was too late. It sounds human, it sounds understandable, but here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the warning that came with that decision was not vague, it was not emotional, it was precise. Give her access, even a fraction, and it will not stay private. It will not stay contained. It will become something else, something public, something transactional. And then it happened. That image didn't just appear. That's the part people are struggling to process, because this wasn't chaos. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't a fleeting emotional moment captured without thought. It was structured, composed, delivered, and when something that deliberate lands in front of millions of people, it stops being a personal moment and starts becoming a statement, a signal, a message that travels far beyond the frame itself. And now the question hangs in the air, was that exactly what was intended?
Charles, you are a legend of Fleet Street. Can you give us a ballpark figure of the value of a photograph of Meghan and the kids back in the UK? What would that go for?
Oh, six figures without a shout. That's
wow.
Because if you strip away the noise, what you are left with is not just a reaction. It is a pattern that feels uncomfortably familiar to those who have watched this story unfold for years. A private door opens quietly, and within days, something from inside that space appears in public, polished, controlled, ready, and when that happens once, you debate it. When it happens again, you start asking harder questions. This is where the tone changes completely, because this is no longer about taste or timing or whether something looked right. Those are surface level arguments.
Made 2 documentaries with Harry, one for the BBC, one for ITV. It was on the strict understanding that these were to be the final word on their mother's death. 20 years on, 2 brothers who had come through the trauma were able to talk about it, were able to share their feelings and close the chapter. And so of course, 10 years on, the fact that Harry is now back here commercializing his mother's death is going to upset William. I don't think it surprises him. I think he knew this was coming.
The real issue sits much deeper. It sits in a boundary that for some people is absolute. And for Prince William, by every account, that boundary has always been singular and unmovable. There is a line, not a flexible one, not one open to interpretation. A line that has been there for decades, shaped by experience, loss, and something far more personal than public perception will ever fully understand. And what makes this moment explosive is not just that the line was approached, but that many believe it was stepped over completely. And here's where it becomes almost impossible to ignore the silence. Because silence in a situation like this is not neutral. It's not passive. It carries weight. It carries meaning.
Definitely. They are now leveraging the kids for clicks, for headlines, to boost their brand, and for money. Why else would you put your kids on Instagram? I got 2 kids, they're grown up. They're not on my social media. I'm not incentivized in any way to share images of my children with the pup.
When someone who has spent a lifetime choosing words carefully suddenly chooses none at all, people notice. They lean in. They try to read between something that isn't even there. And what they think they're seeing now is not sadness. It's something colder, something final. And if that's true, then this isn't just another chapter in a long-running family tension. This could be the moment where the entire dynamic shifts permanently, where the idea of reconciliation quietly disappears. Not with an argument, not with a statement, but with absence, with distance that doesn't close again. But to understand why this feels so different, you have to go back not years, but just days to a room that almost nobody saw, but a meeting that was never meant to become part of the public conversation at all. A meeting shaped by caution, by control, by an awareness that even the smallest detail could spiral if it escaped those walls. Every precaution was taken. No cameras, no leaks, no narrative allowed to form, and still something emerged. And when it did, it didn't feel like a leak.
Definitely. They are now leveraging the kids for clicks, for headlines, to boost their brand, and for money. Why else would you put your kids on Instagram? I got 2 kids, they're grown up, they're not on my social media. I'm not incentivized in any way to share images of my children with the public.
Felt like a release, a controlled one, a deliberate one. And that's where the tension sharpens again, because now the focus shifts from what happened to why it happened. Why that moment? Why that setting? Why that image? Why now, of all times, when the weight of history around that place makes every detail feel amplified? And now everything starts to connect in a way that feels almost impossible to ignore. Because once that image is out, once that moment is no longer contained, the entire narrative begins to rearrange itself around a single uncomfortable idea that this was never just about a visit, never just about a family reconnection, but about what could be taken from it, shaped from it, and ultimately shown to the world in a way that serves something much bigger than a private memory. Look closely at what didn't happen, because that's where the real clue sits. Not a single stray photograph surfaced during that entire visit. No long lens through a hedge, no blurred car entering a gate, no accidental capture at an airport. For a couple who have
William was consulted. In spite of being a minor, he had a say on where his mother was going to be buried. At the time, he decided that it would be Althorpe because nobody's going to bother her nor harass her or exploit her. Most importantly, he thought that his mother would finally find peace.
spent years claiming they cannot move without being watched, followed, photographed. The silence was absolute, airtight, controlled, and then suddenly the only images that exist are the ones chosen, framed, and released deliberately. That contrast is not small. It's enormous. It suggests control at a level that doesn't leave room for coincidence. And that's where the narrative tightens again. Because when something is that controlled, you have to ask what the end goal is. Images like that are not created for nothing. They don't just sit quietly in a personal archive. They travel. They lead somewhere. And when you place that alongside the timing, alongside the growing speculation, alongside the undeniable pull of a date that already carries enormous emotional weight, the picture becomes even more unsettling because there is a date approaching that changes everything. A date that the world already recognizes, that broadcasters circle, that audiences respond to instinctively. 30 years, a number that transforms memory into event, grief into programming, history into something that can be packaged, told, retold, and when that date comes closer, every image, every moment, every carefully placed piece of material begins to feel less like reflection and more like preparation. And suddenly the whispers don't sound so far-fetched anymore. The idea that this visit, this carefully managed return, this completely controlled visual narrative could be laying the groundwork for something larger, something filmed, something structured, something designed to reach millions again, stops sounding like speculation and starts sounding like a possibility that fits too neatly to ignore. Because if you have the access, if you have the imagery, if you have the emotional anchor that the world never stops responding to, then you have something incredibly powerful. And that is where the discomfort deepens, because now the question is no longer just about one photograph. It's about a pattern that stretches back years, the repeated echoes, the mirrored images, the moments that seem to draw from the same well again and again. It creates a sense that this is not spontaneous behavior, but something far more deliberate. It's something built piece by piece over time until it reaches a moment like this where everything aligns. And when people begin to see that pattern, they don't unsee it. They start connecting moments that once felt isolated. They start recognizing the repetition, the same emotional cues, the same visual language, the same careful balance between privacy claimed and exposure delivered. And once that contradiction becomes clear, it changes how every new image is received. It changes how every every new appearance is interpreted. It shifts trust into doubt. And at the center of all of it stands Prince William, not reacting publicly, not stepping forward, not offering a counter-narrative, but watching something unfold that feels hauntingly familiar. Because this is not new territory. This is something Prince William has seen before, lived through before, understood at a level most people never will. The transformation of personal moments into public consumption, the way images can take on lives of their own, the way narratives can spiral once they are released into the world. And that is why the silence feels so heavy, because it isn't confusion, it isn't uncertainty, it's recognition. Recognition of a process that doesn't stop once it starts. Recognition of how quickly something private can become something permanent. Recognition of how difficult it is to reverse once the line has been crossed. And that brings everything back to the same unsettling place, not to what has already happened, but to what happens next. Because if this moment is part of something larger, if it is only the beginning of a wider narrative being constructed piece by piece, then the real story is still ahead, still forming, still moving toward a point where it becomes impossible to ignore completely.